So something that I was always curious about was the higher end palettes. If they were worth it, why people liked them, why people spent money on them, all of that. Now I 100%, I'm a beauty junkie. I love anything to do with hair, makeup, all of it. So I actually recently have purchased a few Natasha Denona palettes, and I was trying to figure out how worth it they actually were. If they were actually worth it, or if they just cost too much money. So I felt like it could go either way. I actually swatched all of them. Apparently I'm no good at swatching because there's that. For the most part, their shades are really, really soft. So the one that I got was the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. The reason I bought this one is because the color story really spoke to me on this. Lately I have been loving greens and pinks. Well, really mostly greens, but I thought the combination of greens and pinks was really unique. So this is the one I ended up buying. Previously, before that, I did purchase two of like the mini palettes, and excuse these because they're a little bit dirty, but I have the mini bronze palette and the mini Biba palette. So unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because they're expensive, but unfortunately I did like these, and so I wanted to bite the bullet and see if there was really a difference in quality from the little ones to the big ones, what all the hype was about, all of that. So that being said, here's kind of the rundown. If you are a makeup junkie like me, you will probably love them. However, that being said, if you're a makeup junkie like me, you'll probably love just about anything. I think I've only ever bought one palette that I absolutely hated. There's been palettes that I don't love, but I've only bought one that I've hated. Like hated everything about it. And that was years ago. It was like a BH Cosmetics palette. So why bite the bullet and spend so much on these? Honestly, you have to kind of decide if it's worth it for you. Because these are also pretty expensive. These are $27. And honestly, the packaging is nice. I wouldn't say that the packaging is anything special. I know people like go gaga for packaging and stuff like that. It's like super dirty. I couldn't care less. The packaging is just the icing on the cake. Obviously if it breaks easily, that annoys me. If there's something wrong with it, or if it feels really cheap, don't love that. But for the most part, the packaging, I'm like, if the product is good and its packaging is kind of tacky, meh, I don't know that I really care all that much. In fact, there's lots of products that I either love or hate the packaging of that people are like, oh, this is beautiful, or this sucks, and I'm like, I don't care. So getting that out of the way, packaging aside, I will tell you, you know how when people like swatch colors and stuff, they're like, oh, it's so buttery. Pfft, stop. That's made up. An eyeshadow can't be buttery. I'm sorry, but no. Ew, you want like Vaseline butter grease on your eyeball? No, just stop. So, that being said, when I swatch these, they are soft. So like this one in the mini Biba palette, it is a soft color. And when I actually go to swatch it, I mean, like, I don't have all that much on my hand. Like, that looks pretty good. Like swatches really good. My finger has a little bit of oil on it, so it didn't swatch great, but let's do a little bit more. So they're very soft. Another thing that I can tell you is that the glitters It's like super reflective, but the glitters have this like texture to them where they almost feel like if you use them enough, you can kind of see like dents where you've used them. I don't know if you can tell in the palette, but they're that soft. So like you touch it, and here, I'm just gonna like tap it with my finger, and you'll see like my finger still came away with quite a bit of product. Like they're just that soft pressed, which can be really great. I'm gonna watch this since it's on my finger anyways. So just really, really soft eyeshadows. That being said, I haven't really hated most eyeshadow palettes that I've bought. I mean, there are definitely ones that are not my favorite. I'm gonna pull out a drugstore one and show you some differences. So we're gonna use this Star Wars ColourPop palette because it's actually the one that I've been reaching for the most lately. I'm gonna try not to blind you with my mirror, but same thing. We're gonna do like basically the same test. These, they're still soft, but they're not in the same realm as the other ones. Like, it's made of a soft iron oxide pigment. It is nice, and I'm gonna swatch that one. Like, swatches beautifully. I would say that the difference super comes into play when it comes to the shimmer formulas. So I'm gonna swatch this guy right here because I think that formula wise it's the closest ColourPop is gonna get. So like we'll do like the tap test where we just tap it. Yeah, like some came off, but it's not as softly pressed as the Natasha Denona one. Now when I like rub my finger in there, kind of running out of room, we're gonna swatch it right here. Like, yes, it's really pretty, but I feel like the formula just feels different because I feel like the Natasha Denona one, it almost feels not like wet, but it's very emollient and like dries down. Even though it's like pretty soft pressed, it almost like dries down in a way and like doesn't really move a lot. Versus this one, you're gonna have to spray it with some sort of glitter glue or like a setting spray or like on your brush or something like that in order to keep it still. Like if you, do you see how that just like spread out across my finger? And the Natasha Denona one does that, but not to the same extent. So getting to whether or not it's worth it. $69, whereas this guy is like 15, 13, 14, somewhere around there. It depends on what you think is worth it. I'm gonna be completely honest. This does have a cool feature where you can like pop these guys out and replace them, which I think is really cool. That being said, would I spend another $69 on the palette? Probably not. Not unless they did a really good job. Because the color story, although the color story is actually what tempted me to buy it, I feel like I should have taken a closer look at this guy and paid a lot closer attention because, surprise, I'm brown, in case you didn't know. And the deepest color they have is this guy. This green is pretty deep too, but the deepest color they have is this, and the rest of them are pretty pastel-y. It's really hard for me to do a full look with this palette by itself. There's nothing wrong with this palette, but I feel like if you saw my swatches, this one completely disappeared on my skin when I swatched it. I can't even use that one. It doesn't show up like anything. So maybe it's a good blending shade. I'll give it that. But it completely disappeared. This one, and this one, that darkest shade is a shimmer shade. It worked pretty well. I actually have it on my eyeballs today. But it is a shimmer shade. And I'm not super impressed with that. Formulation-wise, it's beautiful. The colors are really, really soft. They're really, really easy to blend. They don't distribute crazy amounts of pigment when you try to blend things out. They blend very easily. But I just wish that they had maybe paid a little bit closer attention to where their color story is at. Because these two being the darkest shades, that might work for a lot of people, but again, I'm brown. And it just didn't work as well as I had originally thought it would. I do also have two of the, what are they? They're mini palettes. I want to keep calling them midi, but I think the Retro Glam palette is the midi. And I don't feel the same way about the color stories in these, because I have a darkest, one that's a slightly lighter, I have a little bit more of a mid-tone, and light. I have all of the shades in here. And the same thing with the mini bronze. I have my darker color, I have kind of a middle, and then I have 3 lighter ones, but at least I can make a few different looks with the darker, the mid-toned going up that way. So I think whether or not you're going to like the Natasha Denona palettes are going to be very, very, very much based on a few different factors. The first being price point. Some people just can't get past the price, and I get that, because I guess it was last year, so 2022 was the first time I ever bought an eyeshadow palette this expensive. Don't get me wrong, I've spent $50 on a palette before, but never almost $70. So the first thing is going to be price. Is that worth it? The second thing is, are you going to actually get use out of it? Because I tend to do my eyeshadow every single day, but that's not everybody, and that's not really reality for everybody. And you kind of need to be aware of that. It's going to be pretty cost effective if this is your only palette and all of the colors work for your skin tone. It's not very cost effective if you're like me and you're like, I definitely can't use this color. I don't know that I'm really going to use this color. That's not as cost effective. So those two things, I think, they really seem to be priority one, are those two things. Cost effectiveness. Second, honestly, if you're not a makeup junkie, sometimes I wonder how important it is to have these kind of palettes, because for me, it's like a status symbol to be able to have this makeup, but for the everyday person, they're gonna be fine with their ColourPop, their Milani, their e.l.f. bite-sized palettes, and those are beautiful palettes and they work very, very well. So, is it cost effective, and is there a reason for you to buy it? Because setting formula aside, the colors are beautiful. The formulation is beautiful, but if you set that aside, you just have an expensive palette. That probably doesn't answer everybody's question about it, but I think that gives you a little bit of a reference point of why some people choose to buy it and why people are like, I'm gonna skip that. If I'm being completely honest, I could have definitely lived without this palette, but I was really excited about it because of the color story and because I had liked these. And honestly, for me, it was a little bit of status thing, but I also wanted to be able to see what the hype was about. And I loved these. I loved the little ones. But I have to say, I have to say I also love my e.l.f. palettes that are like, I mean, one shadow less. And I actually think that there's probably more product in this. So this is 5.9 grams, and let's see how much this one is. 0.8 grams. So 5.9 grams and 0.8 grams. So, I mean, if you don't see a problem with your eyeshadow now, I would say just skip it. There's no reason for you to spend your money on it. And here's the thing. I have a hard time saying it's a waste because I've mentioned before, I have a problem. I probably need counseling. I do love makeup. And so I don't necessarily think that it was a mistake for me to buy. However, they are expensive palettes. And if you find that you don't have any problems with your cheaper palettes, like even, I love Juvia's Place. They're a super affordable brand. ColourPop, love them. Milani and e.l.f. make great eyeshadow palettes. The thing is, and there's even a lot of like higher end brands that do a good job too, that aren't going to be that crazy of a price point. So you just have to decide what's worth it. If the status of having that, it's like owning Nike. You can't tell me that owning Nike isn't a status symbol, because it totally is. I grew up dirt poor. You better believe I didn't have any Nike stuff. I didn't have any Adidas stuff. I didn't have any Puma, any Air Jordan, any of that. I grew up dirt poor. So, like Nike for us, like that was a status symbol. And that's the reason that people buy Nike, right? It's like marketing. You're like, do it and you're cool type of thing. And that's kind of how I feel about this palette. I love Natasha Denona palettes. I do think that they're really pretty. They're great to work with. I just noticed I had a stain right here, and that's gonna bother me. Just like make it a V-neck. But it's a status symbol. It's not necessarily better or worse than anything else. Trust me, I've swatched them side by side. I will say the formula is better than some and about the same as others. I will say it's a high-end formula. But I have cheaper palettes that have similar textures and spreadability and all of that. So, is the status symbol important to you? Or not so much? Because that's what you have to decide.